66 games have been played in the NCAA tournament, and only one game remains, the national championship game, North Carolina and Kansas. And both of these teams, they had pretty different roads to get to this point. For Kansas, the 1 seed dominates Texas Southern in the first round. Then in the second round, they're battle tested against Creighton. And Kansas, they had to find a way to win that game to just survive and advance. And I'd argue that if Creighton was at full strength that day, I think Creighton has a really good chance of pulling off that upset. In the Sweet 16, they took down Providence, who had the best season in program history. And in the Elite Eight, they dominated against Miami, a dominant second half despite a slow beginning to that game. The further on the game went, the more dominant the Jayhawks were, and they advanced to the Final Four. And in the Final Four, they dominated from start to finish. They never trailed in the Final Four game against who I believe was the most experienced team in this tournament in Villanova. Never trailed in the game, dominant from start to finish, and they advanced to the championship game. For North Carolina, a team that had high expectations despite beginning the year with first-year head coach Hubert Davis taking over for Roy Williams, one of the greatest coaches in college basketball history. It was a slow start, and many questioned if North Carolina even belonged in the tournament at some points in the year. But once that calendar turned to February, the Tar Heels have just been playing at a completely different level. And I say that they picked up momentum by dominating against Duke in Coach K's last home game. And ever since then, North Carolina, they have been one of the more dominant teams in college basketball. Because coming into the tournament, they were one of the hottest teams in the field. And their first round began with a dominant win against Marquette. And in the round of 32, they upset the defending national champions in Baylor. In the Sweet 16, it was a tightly contested matchup from start to finish against UCLA, another really experienced team in the field who just made the Final Four last season. And in the Elite Eight, they dominated against the Cinderella story of the year in St. Peter's. And in the Final Four, they upset Duke, ending Coach K's career at the Final Four, falling just 2 games short of winning a national championship in his final season. So the stage is set. North Carolina and Kansas for the national championship. And my first impression of this matchup is I think that both of these teams, I think they match up to each other pretty well. I don't think one has a significant advantage in size or stature at all. I do think that maybe one team has a little bit more advantage, but it's not an overwhelming advantage like what we saw with Kansas against Villanova, where Kansas really exploited the lack of Villanova's size in that game. And North Carolina is really shooting the basketball well, especially Caleb Love, who led the way for the Tar Heels in the upset win against Duke with 28 points in that game and had 30 points against UCLA. So he's been stepping up quite a bit in this tournament, including the shot that sent North Carolina to the championship game with less than 30 seconds remaining to put the Tar Heels up by 4. Which leads me into my next portion of this, and that is the 2 components that I think are going to dictate who wins this game. It's going to be who guards the 3-point line the best. Who's going to guard the arc the best? Because we saw Abachi catch fire from the 3-point line against Villanova. The guy just couldn't miss, especially from 3. For the Tar Heels, Brady Manick, the 5th-year senior, has also been shooting well from the 3-point line the entire tournament. And who's going to win the battle inside the paint? That is the most intriguing matchup of this entire game, is the paint. Because as I said in the beginning, I don't think there's a significant size advantage in either of these teams over the other. I think they're pretty evenly matched. But as far as my prediction goes, Kansas is a 4-point favorite at the moment. And I just think that this is the Jayhawks' year. The Jayhawks, they have been having a couple second round exits lately in this tournament. And once they advance the Sweet 16, I just think this Jayhawks team has just turned up a gear. Despite having a few slow starts throughout the games in this tournament, I just think that the way that they started against Villanova, I think it really expressed some confidence for the Jayhawks in tomorrow night's game. As for North Carolina, if they want to win this game, they got to get off to a fast start themselves. They can't afford to fall behind 10-0 like Villanova did in the Final Four game. So if Kansas gets off to a fast start once again, I like the Jayhawks' chances of winning this game. But when you're the underdog in any NCAA tournament game, your main objective is to stay in the game for as long as you can. Because the longer that you're in the game, the more that the crowd is going to turn in your favor. But this may not apply for a championship game, as there's only going to be 2 fan bases for the most part at this game. So with that being said, I have the Jayhawks winning this matchup, and I do have them covering the 4-point spread. But I don't think they're going to overwhelmingly cover it. I think that it's going to be a lot closer than what a lot of people might think. I think that North Carolina will be able to stay in this game, kind of like what Villanova did. If they find themselves behind significantly early on, they might be able to get it down to about 8 or 6, but then Kansas will pull away, like we've seen throughout the last couple of games that the Jayhawks have been in this tournament. So I think the Jayhawks, worst case scenario, they win by about 7 or 8.